Daphne Sharika Tullows missing since July 26, 1988 from Jackson, Mississippi. When she was 7 years old she left home and neighbors saw her walking in the neighborhood. It's like she walked off the face of the earth. I thought we would find her. Daphne Sharika Tullows was 7 years old when she vanished from her North Jackson, Mississippi neighborhood in 1988. Daphne left her grandparents' home on July 26, 1988 around 7 p.m. after a disagreement with her mother, Robbie Tullows, over how many fish sticks she could have for dinner. She wanted more fish sticks, and Robbie told her no, so she left the house and went outside to play. Neighbors later saw Daphne walking south on Azalea Drive toward Northside Drive. She has not been seen since. Daphne was epileptic and vanished without her medication. Robbie later stated Daphne could not go more than 3 days without her medication due to the onset of severe headaches followed by a seizure. Daphne disappeared the same day that wealthy Jackson socialite Ann Lori Heron was kidnapped. Ann's husband received a ransom demand for his wife, but Ann was never found and has since been declared dead. Daphne's aunt, Sylvia Varnell, and other family members believe more police resources went toward searching for Ann than Daphne. Nevertheless, Sylvia said some Jackson police officers worked tirelessly searching for Daphne, and former Jackson Police Department Detective Edna Drake became like a member of the family. Detective Drake stated that a lot of resources may have been pulled in the search for Heron, but that didn't stop police working on Daphne's case. Detective Drake prays constantly for the family that they will have closure, as it bothers her now that we weren't able to bring closure to the family. Detective Drake recalls that police pursued every lead they received, including one that Daphne was alive in New Orleans and another that she was living with relatives in Michigan, but none of the leads panned out. Robbie and her then-boyfriend, Ernest Epps, were investigated, but both took and passed polygraph exams according to the Charlie Project link. However, a newspaper article detailed how Robbie failed a test administered by Officer Joe Webb because she was upset about the child's disappearance. Robbie recalls that afterwards Officer Webb told her "you know something," citing that the answers indicated that she was deceiving them or not telling everything. Police later noted that she was given the test to confirm that the child was missing. Robbie also attributes the suspicion on the police's part on her past drug use, which she said she has been treated for. Family members believe the then-boyfriend or someone associated with him played a role in Daphne's disappearance. Ernest, who is now deceased, was released on a $10,000 bond the same day Daphne disappeared. He was arrested on July 8 after Daphne told an aunt that he had touched her while the family was asleep in their bedrooms. Daphne's crying had woken up her aunt. According to Daphne's grandmother, Shirley Tullows, Ernest's family had called Robbie in an effort to drop the charges by offering $175. In 1990, around 2 years after Daphne's disappearance, Shirley and a neighbor found a shirt lying in a nearby backyard of a home. The shirt had Daphne's name written on the tag. Shirley recalled that all of Daphne's clothes were labeled with her name and kept at her home. However, she would not be able to notice if any clothes were gone unless it was a Sunday dress or coat. Police questioned the residents of the house where the shirt was found and determined they had nothing to do with Daphne's disappearance. The shirt was taken to a crime lab for further tests, but it is unclear what the results were. Shirley later noticed that Daphne's teddy bear was missing from her home. In 2018, family members thought they had found Daphne. They were so hopeful because the woman they believed was Daphne was about the age Daphne would be now, and her first name was Daphne, with one F instead of two. The woman also bore a striking resemblance to family members, and a search produced no vital records of the woman's mother having given birth to the child. However, the woman ended up not being Daphne, as the woman and her mother came to the Jackson Police Department and met with police providing a birth certificate showing the woman's birth, which proved she was not Daphne. Sylvia recalled they shed some tears behind that. It was the closest we had come to finding her. Shirley, now 85 years old, hopes someone will come through and tell her something. Just not knowing is what bothers you so. She has spent most of her life savings in efforts to try to find Daphne and now resides in Spokane, Washington. Robbie remains weak and too emotional to discuss her daughter's disappearance. Daphne remains missing. Detective Drake stated this case will never be closed until that child is recovered. Anyone with knowledge about Daphne's disappearance is asked to call the Jackson Police Department at 601-960-1234. Questions. The failure to pass lie detector tests often bears a negative connotation, so I looked up some cursory information about the tests. One always hears anecdotally about how they are not reliable and how they are inadmissible in courts, but I wanted to learn more. Leonard Sachs, a psychologist at Brandeis University, extensively researched polygraph tests, and in a report for the National Research Council, that was later used by Congress, He surmised that almost a century of research in scientific psychology and physiology provides little basis for the expectation that a polygraph test could have extremely high accuracy. His 1983 report for Congress ended up leading to a nationwide ban on private employers giving polygraph tests to employees, and a subsequent 1998 Supreme Court decision ruled against the use of polygraphic evidence in some federal courts because there is simply no consensus that polygraph evidence is reliable. However, the tests continue to be used due to the belief that they are useful as a prop in the theater of interrogation, and that if the examiner does the theater well, and tricks the subject into believing that his or her lies can be detected, they might confess. Polygraphs might be useful as a deterrent. As an example, if a sex offender believes he or she is going to be regularly subjected to accurate lie detection tests, committing a crime suddenly looks like a guarantee of heading back to prison. In both examples, it does not matter whether the test actually works, just that it's perceived as effective. For some, there may be a less cynical factor involved, something that more closely resembles myth or religion than science. As people want to believe in a just world, and in a just world, people can't get away with lying. Leonard Sax's impression from speaking with some polygraphers is that they believe what they are doing is accurate. Some even say things like, "God gave us this tool to make a better world." Ernest remains a likely suspect, but he is now deceased. I could not find any further information about the results of the testing done on Daphne's shirt found in the nearby yard. I assume the testing yielded no clues. The 2018 article was the last update I found on the case, and the links below comprise all the information I could find on Daphne's disappearance. Hang Lee missing from St. Paul, Minnesota since January 1993. When she was 17, when the woman asked Wallace about Lee, he stated, "She entered my business and never came out." He then threatened to do to her what he did to Lee and told her he knows how to get rid of blood and can cut through bone. Hang Lee was a Highland Park High School senior when she left her family's apartment at the McDonough Homes housing project in St. Paul, Minnesota to go to a job interview on January 12, 1993. She has not been seen since. Hang and her family moved to St. Paul from a refugee camp in Laos when she was younger. Friends and relatives recall her as a slight, naive teenager, a bookworm who loved romance novels, who dreamed of becoming a writer who would chronicle the Hmong experience in America. On January 12, 1993, she told her brother, Kua Lee, that her job interview was with a friend's boss, later identified as Mark Stephen Wallace, who had a small painting business. Kua was working with Hang at Wong Cafe on Rice Street, which paid $7 an hour. As Mark was going to pay a little more, she went to the job interview with Kua, stating they both were trying to make money because their family didn't have much. Hang was supposed to work on the night she disappeared, but she called her boss, Eileen Lee, no relation, and told her she had a job interview. She later opined that it was really unlike Hang to not show up the next day for work. Hang left behind her clothing, her purse which contained a lead ball and knife for her protection, her $100 paycheck, and the savings she used to plan for tuition at the University of Minnesota that fall. Hang's parents, who spoke no English, reported her missing, but police initially seemed to write her off as just another troubled runaway. Kua remembers Hang saying before she left, "If I don't come back, please come looking for me. I don't trust Nikki." Nikki was Kia Lee's nickname, no relation, and she worked for Mark and was a friend of Hang's. She later told police she introduced Hang to him after he asked if she knew any girl who might also want a job. Nikki initially told police she had seen Hang leaving home with some unknown young men. It was only months later that she changed her story and named her employer as the man she last saw Hang with. Nikki said she lied originally because she believed Hang might have run away and would return soon, and because her employer had warned her not to tell anyone about his business. Nikki worked as a receptionist at Mark's East Side painting and decorating business from December 1992 until March 1993, but investigation showed she knew very little about Mark's business. Nikki revealed no customers or other business people, except young teenage boys, ever came to the business. When they came, Mark would go into his office with them and lock the door. Mark talked to Nikki about modeling and had taken several pictures of her, promising that she would get a job with a friend of his. She never met this friend and doesn't know what happened to the pictures. Nikki also detailed an incident where she was given a drink by Mark, who told her it would keep her from being nauseated by paint fumes. She started feeling numb and sleepy, waking up on the floor wrapped in a blanket. In June 1993, the police shifted their investigation from that of being a runaway when Nikki provided information about Mark's involvement and learned of Mark being out of prison for about a year and a half after being convicted of 2 rapes. He had used the premise of a job interview to rape a 16-year-old girl in Cottage Grove and later threatened to kill her and her family if she told anyone about what happened. Mark used the same ploy to contact a woman who turned out to be an undercover female officer before he was arrested. He had called a woman who with a phony offer of employment at a radio station, but the woman called police instead, who sent the undercover officer. Police searched Mark's home, office, car, and pickup truck but found no clues, after which Mark hired an attorney and refused to speak to investigators. Mark stated that he dropped off Hang at a gas station to meet some friends once the job interview ended. However, none of Hang's friends reported seeing her at the gas station. While police looked at Wallace as a suspect, he was never arrested or charged in connection with Hang's case. In 2016, Mark was in jail in Washington County, and St. Paul police were hopeful that charges filed against him there alleging kidnapping, stalking and possession of methamphetamine could lead to a break in the Hang Lee case, but at the time, he had not yet spoken to St. Paul investigators. According to the criminal complaint, Mark was verbally and physically abusive to a 20-year-old woman who was a high school friend of his daughter. The woman told police that she became aware of Hang's disappearance in St. Paul and asked Mark about it. He said, "She entered my business and never came out," later telling her he would do to her what he had done to the girl in St. Paul. In 2017, 24 years after her disappearance, Hang's family finally held a spirit release ceremony in accordance with Hmong customs. The ceremony is meant to allow the person's soul to be free for reincarnation. Kua fought not to do to this, but hopes that releasing her spirit will raise awareness and maybe it will make some people really talk. Hang's father, Xiong Lee, had not wanted to have a spirit release ceremony for her until her body was found, but he encouraged Kua to go forward with it before he died in 2013. Hang's mother, Chung Vang, has forgiven whoever hurt her daughter, but she wants to know where Hang's remains are so they can give her a proper funeral and burial. Chung invited the community to Hang's spirit release ceremony, saying those who love her, please come. Also, please come and see that this is not something that's just in a story, it is real, too. Sergeant Paul Palos of the St. Paul Police Department stated, "Hang isn't forgotten, and the case is active, it's ongoing, we will find her someday." Hang's case remains categorized as a missing person, not a homicide. It is one of St. Paul's oldest missing person cases. Kua hopes that Hang is alive, but he thinks the chances are slim because she would have contacted him if she could. If you have any information about Hang's disappearance, please call the St. Paul Police Department. Questions. It appears Mark remains the most likely suspect. However, I could not find any information on his reinvestigation in 2016. In February 2018, he was sentenced to 54 months in prison for the kidnapping the woman who questioned him about Hang's disappearance. He was also sentenced earlier in the month for throwing scalding water on an inmate's face causing second-degree burns.